Welcome back. In a last-minute cancellation, former President Trump is no longer holding his Save America rally tonight in Nebraska due to severe weather. The rally was meant to drum up support for Charles Herbster, a Republican candidate for governor, but Trump's backing of him, among other candidates, is ripping some Republicans away from showing support. The former president has been hailed the dominant force of the Republican Party. As primaries approach, the GOP is watching if the former president's grip on the party remains strong, especially among voters. In a recent poll from Morning Consult, Trump's approval rating with Republican voters is high in key battleground states, but is his political popularity enough to bring the red wave in November? Our D.C. insider, NewsNation Washington bureau chief Mike Viqueira joins us now with some answers. So, Mike, what risk does former President Trump face if candidates he's endorsed don't win in the upcoming races?
Well, and that's a great question, Rudabeh, and we're about to find out because we are heading, and buckle up, we are heading into a period over the course of the next 4 weeks in May. Every Tuesday, there's going to be a major primary where Republicans are fighting it out and where former President Trump's reputation as a power broker is going to be on the line. He is, of course, the former president. He is, without question, the biggest power broker, most powerful power broker in the Republican Party right now. And if you are running in one of those red state primaries, especially one that has Republicans vying against each other, front-running Republicans, that is the one endorsement that you definitely want. Okay, joining me right now, Tal Axelrod in our rooftop NewsNation studios, here from our partners at the Hill. Tal, it's great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Rudabeh mentioned the former president's trip out to Nebraska. Canceled tonight because of weather, but he's going to be back on Sunday, and it really does put him to the test because this gentleman, Charles Herbster, he's in some trouble, some ethical trouble. He's been accused by 8 women of sexual harassment. This is sort of a state where the Republican establishment, obviously it's a pro-Trump state, but the sitting governor, a Republican, really is fighting against the Trump-backed candidate there. So are we seeing a split, the beginnings of a split between the so-called establishment Republicans and the Trump wing of the party, which has obviously been preeminent for years now?
I'm not so sure in this specific race, just because the governor, Pete Ricketts, has a very personal feud with Herbster. So I think that is a very unique aspect to this race. And if you look at this race, as in other races, the candidates are very supportive of Trump's agenda. So the fact that they're all supportive of at least his policies does show you the power he still has.
Okay, we do have one strong indication of the popularity of former President Trump in a lot of swing states among Republicans. In Georgia, 86%. Of course, Herschel Walker, backed by Trump, running for the Senate, way ahead in that race. But David Perdue, the former senator, way behind, both backed by President Trump. In Ohio, 80%. Approve of President Trump. J.D. Vance surging there after his endorsement by the former president. In North Carolina, Ted Budd, the sitting congressman, President Trump has an 87% approval rating among Republicans there. Ted Budd surging as well. And in Pennsylvania, Dr. Oz is similar to Nebraska in a way because establishment Republicans aren't really crazy about Dr. Oz there either. But Republicans do love President Trump in Pennsylvania. 77% approve of him. So he's endorsing in these swing states. And we're going to find out very shortly how all this is going to work out. But what's the downside of having his endorsement if you clear that first hurdle in the primary and then head into the general election?
Well, we saw that Trump is a motivator for Democrats. We saw that big time in 2018.
And Democrats need a motivator this year.
They do. I mean, enthusiasm is down among Democrats. That you see that in several polls. I think we're going to have our first test this month with all these primaries and then later in the general if he is as big of a motivator out of office, especially for Democrats in November, because he got them to the polls in 2018 and in 2020 when he was the president. Now he's not.
Okay, next Tuesday, let's go through these states one by one. Ohio, May 3rd, J.D. Vance. He's been surging. What's the dynamic of that race there?
Well, I think he got a huge boost.
By President Trump.
The Trump endorsement is huge.
Yeah.
The Trump endorsement did come out on the first day of Passover and Good Friday, right before Easter, and less than 3 weeks before the primary. So it's a shortened runway to saturate it
on
among
a day
voters.
when people weren't paying attention.
Exactly. But I mean, they've really gone all out. Vance was at a Trump rally. Donald Trump Jr. has been all over Ohio for Vance. So they're really trying to make the most of it. And the Fox News poll shows that he's doing well now.
Pennsylvania, the week after that, well, I would say May 17th is Pennsylvania. Dr. Oz got the endorsement. A big debate at our NewsNation station just last week, or actually it was on Tuesday, wasn't it? Earlier this week. What's the situation there?
Well, that one's an interesting one because it's really a race between Oz and Dave McCormick,
Oz
the former
getting the
hedge
Trump
fund manager.
endorsement, yeah.
Oz got the Trump endorsement, and
there's a rally coming up on May
there's
6th, I guess, next
There's
Friday.
a rally coming up that'll be a big boost.
With President
and it's
Trump,
interesting
yeah.
because the polls have still shown a very tight race. Not a ton of polling in Pennsylvania after the Trump endorsement, so we'll see. But Oz hasn't spent a lot of time in the state before this race. He's taken some stances in the past on things like abortion and gun rights that are kind of opposed to GOP orthodoxy. So in there, if Trump can pull someone like that over the line, it'll show a lot about his power.
Well, yeah, and the thing that attracted President Trump to Dr. Oz, and he said this, was his celebrity. He's been on television for 18 years.
Yeah.
People like him.
He's not the first celebrity.
Democracy in real time. They vote with their remote controls, right?
Not the first celebrity that Trump endorsed, and I don't think will be the last.
And finally, Georgia, where, again, Herschel Walker's crushing everyone. I mean, Herschel Walker had big name recognition. He's a hero on the gridiron of the Georgia Bulldogs, for many years running. He's a legend. But David Perdue got the endorsement against the arch enemy, the sitting governor, Brian Kemp, in Georgia. What's the status there?
Well, I think it's very interesting because Brian Kemp is a conservative's conservative. He obviously bucked Trump big time in 2020 by not overturning the election.
Heresy
for Trump, but it's not an ideological heresy. So you have someone who is, as far as his conservative bona fides, so you have someone who is well-known, very conservative, and really bucking that up with things like, looser gun laws and making it tougher to vote. So really leaning into some of the issues Republicans care about now.
Georgia, one of the first states to crack down on.
And I think that's different from Herschel Walker. He's running against other people in the primary who are not nearly as well known as Kemp. So in that primary, he had big name ID already.
That one's not.
He puts it away.
Yeah, May 24th. That's the last major one in May. So he may have time to come back. Maybe Perdue will make a winner out of President Trump there as well.
It's not impossible.
All right. So bottom line, President Trump's power on the rise or on the wane as we head into this crucial month of primaries?
Well, this month will be a huge gauge.
Yeah.
In some of if he has a clean sweep and all of his endorsed candidates win, obviously is a huge statement about where he stands in the party. If it's a mixed record or if most or all lose, that'll also send a statement.
Yeah.
And again, now out of power, that's another dynamic that we'll have to look for.
Okay, Sal, thanks a lot. Great to talk to you. All right, Ruta Bay. So we're heading into a crucial month. Stick with your NewsNation stations around the country. We're going to have all the coverage, and it really is going to give us a strong indication of not only the direction of the Republican Party, but the prospects for Democrats holding on to control of the Senate and the House come November or losing control.
A bellwether everyone is watching for. Vic, thank you.
Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.